The grass along the path was wet. Private First Class Paul Berlin lay back and turned his head so that he could look at the dew with his eyes closed. Another trick to forget the war. He might have slept. "I wasn't afraid," he was screaming, or dreaming, facing his father's stern eyes. "I wasn't afraid," he was saying. When he opened his eyes, a soldier was sitting beside him, quietly chewing a stick of devilment gum. "You sleeping again?" the soldier whispered. "No," said Private First Class Paul Berlin. The soldier grunted, chewing his gum. Then he twisted the cap off his canteen, took a swallow and handed it through the dark. "Take some," he whispered. "Thanks." "You're the new guy?" Yes. He did not want to admit it, being new to the war. The soldier grunted and handed him the stick of gum. "Chew it quiet, okay? Don't blow no bubbles or nothing." "Thanks, I won't." He could not make out the man's face in the shadows. They sat still, and Private First Class Paul Berlin chewed the gum until all the sugars were gone. Then the soldier said, "Bad day today, buddy." Private First Class Paul Berlin nodded wisely, but he did not speak. "Don't think it's always so bad," the soldier whispered. "I don't want to scare you. You'll get used to it soon enough. They've been fighting wars a long time, and you get used to it. Yeah, you will." They were quiet a while, and the night was quiet, no crickets or birds, and it was hard to imagine it was truly a war. He searched for the soldier's face but could not find it. It did not matter much. Even though he saw the fellow's face, he would not know the name, and even if he knew the name, it would not matter much. "Haven't got the time?" the soldier whispered. "No. Rats. Don't matter, really. Goes faster if you don't know the time anyhow." "Sure. What's your name, buddy?" "Paul." "Nice to meet you," he said, and in the dark beside the path they shook hands. "Mine's Toby. Everybody calls me Buffalo, though." The soldier's hand was strangely warm and soft, but it was a very big hand. "Sometimes they just call me Buff," he said. And then they were quiet. They lay in the grass and waited. The moon was very high now and very bright. They were waiting for a cloud cover. The soldier suddenly snorted. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said, but then he snorted again. "A bloody heart attack," the soldier said. "Can't get over it. Old Billy Boy croaking from a lousy heart attack. A heart attack! Can you believe it?" The idea made Private First Class Paul Berlin smile. He couldn't help it. "Ever hear of such a thing?" "Not till now," said Private First Class Paul Berlin, still smiling. "Me either," said the soldier in the dark. "Dying of a heart attack. Didn't know him. Did you?" "No." "Tough as nails." "Yeah." "And what happens? A heart attack. Can you imagine it?" "Yes," said Private First Class Paul Berlin. He wanted to laugh. "I can imagine it." And he imagined it clearly. He giggled. He couldn't help it. He imagined Billy's father opening a telegram. "Sorry to inform you that your son Billy Boy was yesterday scared to death in action in the Republic of Vietnam, violently succumbing to a heart attack suffered while under enormous stress, and it is with greatest sympathy that—" He giggled again. He rolled onto his belly and pressed his face into his arms. His body was shaking with giggles. The soldier hissed at him to shut up, but he could not stop giggling and remembering the hot afternoon and poor Billy Boy, and how they'd been drinking Coca-Cola from bright red aluminum cans, and how they'd started on the day's march, and how a little while later poor Billy Boy stepped on a mine, and how it made a tiny little sound, poof, and how Billy Boy stood there with his mouth wide open looking down where his foot had been blown off, and how finally Billy Boy sat down very casually, not saying a word, with his foot lying behind him, most of it still in his boot. He giggled louder. He could not stop. He bit his arm, trying to stifle it, but remembering. "War's over, Billy," the men had said in consolation, but Billy Boy got scared and started crying and said he was about to die. "Nonsense," the medic said. Doc Purrett about Billy Boy kept bawling, tightening up, his face going pale and transparent, and his veins popping out, scared stiff. Even when Doc Purrett stuck him with morphine, Billy Boy kept crying. "Shut up!" the big soldier hissed. But Private First Class Paul Berlin could not stop. Giggling and remembering, he covered his mouth. His eyes stung, remembering how it was when Billy Boy died of fright. "Shut up!" But he could not stop giggling, the same way Billy Boy could not stop bawling that afternoon. Afterward, Doc Pirret had explained, "You see, Billy Boy really died of a heart attack. He was scared he was gonna die, so scared he had himself a heart attack, and that's what really killed him. I seen it before." So they wrapped Billy in a plastic poncho, his eyes still wide open and scared stiff, and they carried him over to the Meadow 2 rice paddy. And then, when the medevac helicopter arrived, they carried him through the paddy and put him aboard. And the mortar rounds were falling everywhere, and the helicopter pulled up and Billy Boy came tumbling out, falling slowly and then faster, and the paddy water sprayed as if Billy Boy had just executed a long and dangerous dive, as if trying to escape Graves registration, where he would be tagged and sent home under a flag, dead of a heart attack. "Shut up!" the soldier hissed, but Paul Berlin could not stop giggling, remembering, scared to death. Later, they waded in after him, probing for Billy Boy with their rifle butts, elegantly and delicately probing for Billy Boy in the stinking paddy, singing, some of them, "Where have you gone, Billy Boy, Billy Boy? Oh, where have you gone, charming Billy?" Then they found him, green and covered with algae, his eyes still wide open and scared stiff, dead of a heart attack suffered while "Shut up!" the soldier yelled loudly, shaking him. But Private First Class Paul Berlin could not stop. The giggles were caught in his throat, drowning him in his own laughter, scared to death like Billy Boy. Giggling, lying on his back, he saw the moon move, or the clouds moving across the moon. Wounded in action, dead of fright. A fine war story. He would tell it to his father, and how Billy Boy had been scared to death, never letting on. He could not stop. The soldier smothered him. He tried to fight back, but he was weak from the giggles. The moon was under the clouds and the column was moving. The soldier helped him up. "You okay, buddy?" "Sure." "What's so bloody funny?" "Nothin'. You can get killed laughin' that way." I know that. You gotta stay calm, buddy." The soldier handed him his rifle. "Half the battle just staying calm. You'll get better at it," he said. "Come on now." He turned away, and Private First Class Paul Berlin hurried after him. He was still shivering. He would do better once he reached the sea, he thought, still smiling a little. A funny war story that he would tell to his father. How Billy Boy Watkins was scared to death. A good joke. But even when he smelled the salt and heard the sea, he could not stop being afraid.